In Japan 1983, Nintendo's first home console, the Family Computer, or Famicom, called the Nintendo Entertainment System or NES in America, launched with a lineup of arcade ports, including Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. These games all had relatively rudimentary designs from their gameplay to sound. Their arcade cabinets were made with a limiting sound chip that was only really capable of utilizing 2 sound channels. Nintendo worked around this by adding circuits to play for specific sound effects, such as Donkey Kong pounding his chest, or Mario jumping, that didn't interrupt the baseline audio, as limited sound channels oftentimes meant overlapping tones for more complex sounds. Nonetheless, the soundtracks were quite simple, consisting of only a repeating 1, or in Donkey Kong Jr.'s case, 2-bar figure. Arcade titles lent an interesting starting point for the legacy of video game music, as while they weren't expanded upon much by their home console ports, they were some of the first attempts at creating intriguing loops to accompany gameplay in Nintendo's early history. Arcade ports were classified, at least in the American releases, as part of the Arcade series of games. The Action series, starting with the release of Urban Champion for the Famicom in February of 1984, is where home video game sound design started to take on a shape much more recognizable to us today. In older games, consistent music would typically be relegated to bonus stages, not general gameplay, in order to conserve CPU utilization. However, nearly a year after the Famicom first hit store shelves, technology was evolving. Developers at HAL were able to condense more memory into a single cartridge, which allowed them to improve upon the conventions of past games and improve the sound capabilities. This was incredibly evident in November of 1984, when Urban Champion and Clu-Clu Land, 2 games in the Action series of releases, reimagined how music could accompany gameplay during this early home console era. Urban Champion, a game in which 2 players battle with punches on a street corner while attempting to knock the other player out of the right or left side of the screen, consists of 3 looping tracks, composed by Hirokazu Tanaka. The intro music for Area 1 immediately throws the player into an American street corner, seemingly an allusion to Leonard Bernstein's Cool Fugue from West Side Story, an iconically American musical. Here are the 2 themes side by side. The piece that accompanies the fight music for round 1 is a 4-measure repeated phrase, very similar to the arcade cabinets that preceded it. The theme is a quick tune with a swinging feel, which really helps to convey the urbanness of the brawl. Although there were only 2 pitches, a noise channel and a triangle wave, while the pulse waves were utilized for punching sound effects, the use of the low tone helped carry the sound further than if it was in an upper register, as the higher sound channels would oftentimes be occupied with diegetic game sound, such as the effects for punching or a police car driving by. On the other hand, the noise channel's pattern almost always coincides with the punching going on in the game. Due to the rhythmic nature required to make substantial process with beating down one's opponent, it would be of great benefit to listen to when the noise channel activates and time button presses to match. Area 2 shifts the main theme up a whole step, which contributes to the building tension of each brawl. However, the noise channel remains perfectly consistent, still giving the player something to latch onto when deciding how to time their attacks. Area 3 throws out all silences in between the notes and goes all out in the melody, repeating eighth notes indefinitely to really add to the tension of the situation. This would be the final area before a winner is declared, and thus the music reaches a peak. Once again, the noise channel is unchanged, providing a comfortable swung groove for the player to fall back on, regardless of the change in the surrounding environment, and keeping a consistent theme throughout different stages. While Urban Champion would do nothing particularly special with its soundtrack, at least by today's standards, it was the first of the Nintendo published titles to somewhat substantially change up music within a game's stages. This greatly added to feelings of tension and urgency, especially in such a high-stakes multiplayer brawler. The other release of November 1984, Clu-Clu Land, would take this idea and run with it. Clu-Clu Land is a puzzle game, akin to the likes of Pac-Man, that had the player controlling a fish named Bubbles, avoiding enemies while spinning in circles to create a picture on the screen. There were tons of elements within the game. Bubbles moved continuously in one direction and was only controllable by latching onto pegs throughout the stage. Different stages had a selection of several different pictures that could occur. There were hidden trampolines that would bounce Bubbles in the opposite direction, hidden collectibles that would add bonus points, and so on. The music only added to the chaos. Composed by Akito Nakatsuka, the main theme consisted of a triangle and pulse wave that seemed to be disjointed at many points. While the bass consists of a quarter note to eighth note pattern, the treble is often grouped into fives, which makes it seem slightly off. In addition, the theme is relatively long, at least compared to Urban Champion. It's a total of 12 measures with an A and B section that repeat until the 800 seconds on screen go down to 200 seconds, in which a noticeable shift occurs. The busy but meandering theme 1 is replaced by a high-intensity up-tempo revamp of the main theme. The same general feel remains, but rather than the eighth note being the rhythm of choice in the upper voice and quarter or eighth notes in the lower, the treble clef shifts to near constant 16th notes while the bass shifts to constant eighth notes, really driving home the rush that the player is in. This would actually be one of the first ever titles to introduce the concept of a music shift when a timer runs low. While this may be a standard audio cue to hurry up in modern games, Clue Land, at least to my knowledge, started this trend. Many players don't look up to the top of the screen during focused gameplay, so adding a different jingle to alert players of impending death was an ingenious way to prevent rage-filled meltdowns if the timer did sneak up on you. In fact, while there was a timer in Urban Champion, this exact issue often occurred during gameplay. There was no audio cue to coincide with the timer. Luckily, games from this point forward would begin implementing the innovations started by Clue Land, saving many players a headache along the way. The game's theme has reappeared many times since its Famicom NES release, including a remixed version in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Smash Ultimate. In this remix, you can really hear how staggered the rhythm is between top and bottom lines. It gets slightly lost within gameplay, as there are a lot of other sounds going on, but the effect is definitely still heard in its 1984 debut. Nonetheless, the music of Clue Land did a fantastic job of shaping its 2D world, similar to Urban Champion, and markedly better than the arcade ports before it. They both added new standards to their respective genres that would be built upon by later titles made by both Nintendo and competing developers. The next step in the development of early Nintendo music came in January of 1985, with the releases of Balloon Fight and Ice Climber, once again composed by Tanaka and Nakatsuka respectively. While Balloon Fight has a much more complex soundtrack that we shall dive into momentarily, Ice Climber shares many similarities to the likes of old-school arcade titles, at least in terms of music. Ice Climber follows Popo and Nana as they attempt to scale a tall, snowy mountain by breaking blocks and jumping. Although the setting would suggest that some type of winter theme would be appropriate, the player is instead greeted with an incredibly jazzy tune at the title, with a classic 8-bar blues in the bass line and an upbeat trilly tune in the melody. Winter music is often associated with sharper timbres that may sound akin to ice or sleigh bells. However, the NES really isn't capable of creating such distinct sounds, so rather than going with something Christmassy, the theme goes in a totally different direction. The unexpected nature of this is almost certainly one of the main reasons the song has remained so iconic to this day. While there is a consistent soundtrack throughout normal gameplay, as had become the standard at this point in the Famicom's history, it's pretty underwhelming. However, after a level is completed and the bonus stage is unlocked, the music really begins to shine through. A 30-second reprisal of the title theme plays, utilizing all 3 sound channels. There really isn't a whole lot else to say about this game, as Ice Climbers didn't really build upon past action games when it came to sound design. The same, however, cannot be said about Balloon Fight. Balloon Fight, or at least the first game mode, is pretty much a clone of the game Joust, released for arcades in 1982. While Balloon Fight retextured everything and had slightly different physics, from a sound design perspective, it was also essentially the same. It had no background music, but included a few sounds for hitting an enemy, knocking an enemy out, and so on. However, where Balloon Fight really breaks free is at Game Mode C, Balloon Trip. The player's mission is simple: go through the map, right to left, popping balloons and avoiding lightning, as the game calls it. The soundtrack accompanying this game mode is notable for several different reasons. Not only does it utilize all three of the noise, square, and triangle wave sound channels, it introduces a melodic theme that's significantly longer than the standard 8 to 12 measure themes for the time. There's a short 4-measure intro, followed by 8 measures of melody, which mostly remains in the bass line. After the 4th reprisal of the main theme, the noise channel gets its own drum break before the theme repeats. Tanaka borrows ideas from his previous composition in Urban Champion Street Fight Area 1, choosing to repurpose the triplet eighth notes in the bass line to their own standalone melody. While it is a relatively simple sequence, the bounciness of the bassline helps to make the player feel like they're flying over the ocean with fragile and somewhat unpredictable balloons. Another contribution to this feeling is through the many timbral differences presented in the triangle channel. Up until now, the Famicom's triangle waves had been relegated to mimicking the sounds of bassy instruments. However, Tanaka uses the triangle wave to portray 4 differently pitched tom-toms, a type of drum, something that I haven't heard in any other Famicom soundtrack until this point. While this does cut off the melodic theme during the drum break, the innovation allowed for listeners at the time to experience sound differences they had likely not heard before. These many differences in technique certainly set Balloon Fight's theme apart from the many other Famicom titles that had come out previously. Before I move on, I'd like to bring just a couple of examples of later versions of this theme into the conversation. Balloon Fight was remixed by Ryo Nagamatsu with all new sounds in Balloon Trip Breeze, a minigame for Nintendo Land, adding real samples to every part of the sound, but the bass line. I honestly think that the triangle wave is just so iconic that it shouldn't be touched. It was also remixed for Smash 4 and Ultimate, with heavy emphasis on the intro music as well as the classic main theme we all know and love. Again, while most of the sound had been replaced by actual instruments, it keeps the drum break with the original Famicom technology, driving home just a little bit more nostalgia. Anyways, let's move on to the final section, the end of 1985. After this point, several other Famicom titles started experimenting with several approaches to composition, timbral variation, and length. Robot Gyro, called Gyromite in the States, featuring Rob the Robot, was one such example, also composed by Tanaka. Similar to Balloon Fight, it forewent the short repetitive themes of previous Nintendo games and opened itself up to longer melodies, as well as different ways of thinking about the sound channels, with a couple different drum breaks present throughout each of the different themes. The next massive step in innovation would come in September of 1985, with Super Mario Bros., a game you may have heard about at least once or twice. Rather than analyzing the music in depth, which has been done more times than I can count, I'd instead like to talk about the incredible impact it had on video game music as a whole. The Mario theme introduced the idea of complex, multi-section themes accompanying video games. It was one of the first games of its time to do such a thing, and although it required quite a bit of capacity on the cart, Nintendo certainly figured it was worth it to bring the game alive. Not only is the main theme long and complex, it also has equally impressive underwater and castle tracks that have certainly held their own. These ideas have gone on to shape not just later entries in the Mario franchise, such as Mario 3, Super Mario World, and Mario 64, but many platformers as a whole, Mega Man 2 took a lot of this to the next level with its Wily Castle theme. While it retains the same basic idea, playing off the many repetitive notes in Mario's castle theme, it adds many new layers to the equation, including shifting the sound channels to encompass more than one single melodic line. There are countless examples on the NES of this type of transformation and innovation, but to conclude, I'd like to show one small example from New Super Mario Bros. Wii that, I feel, encapsulates all that the original Mario theme set off to do.
Mario Brothers, wee-hee!
The main theme from New Super Mario Bros. Wii plays off many of the tropes that Mario on the Famicom and NES introduced. A swung feel, multiple repeating sections in the same basic format of bass percussion and melody, to name a few. These all work together to have a jumping effect, something that Mario intentionally implemented. While Koji Kondo served only as a supervisor to Shiho Fuji and Ryo Nagamatsu, the same composer from Nintendo Land, his influence is certainly felt. Where the main theme really stands out in a way that I feel is a modern take on the Super Mario Bros. Theme is with the ba vocals and environmental reaction to it. Every time these vocals hit, enemies on screen will dance and flowers will jump up and down. The first thing the player sees when entering World 1 Level 1 is a Goomba, a bunch of flowers, and the same block layout from Mario 1. Before they would get the chance to run directly into the Goomba, the ba plays, and everything on screen jumps a bit. This seems intended to prompt the player to jump as well, allowing them to avoid the Goomba if they were running straight towards it from the start of the level. This directly mirrors the original Mario's approach to sound design. Right as the theme kicks in after the introduction, the player would be approaching the Goomba to the right. The sudden music seems like a cue to jump, trying to get the player to sync their timing with the music and sparing their first life. 24 years after the release of Kondo's original masterpiece, we had come full circle. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed this look into early Famicom music, early NES music, and its impact on video game music as a whole. This was completed as a final project for Will Meyer's course, Video Game Music and Sound at UChicago, and it was definitely a really interesting rabbit hole to go down. I included all of my references in the description, and if I got anything wrong or if you disagree with anything I said, leave a comment or message me on Instagram or something. I would love to talk about it. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe because I do kind of make video essays on here. It's kind of what I do. And again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.